Whoa.
I have a few areas I'm interested in just chatting about, and hearing your thoughts, I suppose, and reactions based on your experiences as a composer. So, I've listened to a couple of other interviews you've done, so I won't be going over like exact same things, but I made note of some things that were really interesting that you said. Like, the first thing that really struck me was that I think you value the importance of soft skills, like how to communicate with, your clients. So the director or whoever your client is, because I think that's really important as well. Aside from having the talent as a composer, I think being able to communicate effectively is almost as important, because so much can be lost in the communication, and you could be doing a great job and or think you are and not get it across to the director, and vice versa. It's really important that and directors aren't musicians. So yeah, I was struck by something you said that resonated with me, and I was going to ask you how, like, so you're ultimately serving the director's vision, right, and the story. Have you ever encountered a situation where you've had to negotiate your own creative vision? Like, at what point do you compromise your own creative vision, and do you just at the end of the day do whatever they want?
Bingo. Or I'm thinking of Inglorious Bastards. That's a bingo, or something. There's a character who says that.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's the ending. I don't. It's weird because I think as we're learning to do what we do, and you're coming into your own as a writer or a maker of things, you kind of, you feel it. We're all insecure about it, what we do. We all need a hug, a virtual hug or whatever. We all need to be told, "Oh, you're great," um, and then in life it doesn't really happen. It's not something like that's bound to happen, and much to our kind of like surprise as we start to move along, we realize we don't have much agency in what we make when we are writing for other people. So when we are working for a director or a producer, and the only reason why I'm mentioning this is because the way in which you've made posited the question, or phrased it, was that you have to compromise. I think they, as your relationship starts with anybody, they learn to hear and they learn to communicate with you what they like and don't like, and you kind of communicate with them why you like and don't like what you do. But most of the time, when the directors have a little bit more experience, or as they're figuring out, or they're in a position, they're always in the position of power because they're the ones financing your endeavors, right? They're the ones that are giving you the opportunity to do the work. Their decision is really right. And I'm not saying, and objectively speaking, they are correct because they are hiring you. And objectively speaking, you must make a change. And only if you feel like very, very, very passionately about a specific piece of music and its reasoning, should you bring it up. But I've learned not to ever really say anything other than, okay, let's see if we can come up with another alternative, because it's not art, right? And I've said this before, but I really don't think. I think that if we put ourselves in a position to say, to think that what we're doing is art, then we put ourselves in a position where we're very much more vulnerable, because it's our art. It's not our work, it's our art. And so if a person that is hiring you and working with you is saying they don't like it, they're saying they don't like your art. But it's really your work. It's just notes you've put together in music that kind of does something. And if you're a craftsperson and good at what you do, you're kind of doing more than one. You should be able to make more than one table, for example, if that's what they hired you to do. We want a table. We don't like this table. Okay, let me see if I can make you another table. And you go make another one. And it really much changes, I think, how you can process that, because you really are serving the vision of whoever hired you. It's a service industry we're in. It's not, it's not our gift to them. of music that we are providing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does to a certain extent. I think it's really important for composers to remember that. At the same time, I suppose there is the human element going into the work. Like if AI is becoming more advanced and starting to compose music, supposedly, what's the difference then? You know, if as composers we're just putting notes on a page, I think a part of ourselves is going into it, and I suppose that's why there is a bit of ego. Maybe it's ego. I don't know involved.
Oh yeah, it is. It is absolutely ego.
But
The ego
yeah.
is the mind killer, is a relationship killer. Ego is the thing that gets you fired or unemployed again. Ego, and it's the thing that the people in power usually sometimes have and are in a position that they use it to your own detriment, you know. And but yeah, I'm always going back to that. But artificial intelligence, I think that's awesome that artificial intelligence is happening. I think it's great that that I think I think there's something to be said about what the human creative gift is. It's the spirit. It's why if you and I have a scene to score, you will score it one way and I'll score it a different way. And the AI may score it a third way. But it's choices at the end of the day. And I think as long as directors are not artificial intelligence, I think we'll be okay, you know.
Okay. So you've no problem with AI taking your job in the future?
No, no, because I don't think I don't think that's sort of it. It depends the kind of director and the kind of serviceable music. Music is just it's a product, and not all music is art, and not all paintings are art. You know, art is something that, and that's the mindset that it's helped me. Really, we had a guest in our school called Salam Remy that came and spoke, and he said something. It was like 5 years ago, and it really messed me up. It was like, "You're not your work." He said this to the students that were like, "Oh, I don't know, because when I wake up and I try to get creative, I can't really find, and then I just come up with something, and then I show it, and then they kind of destroy the music, destroy what I did, my art." And he's like, "You're not your work. You know that, right?" And I was like, "Oh my God, he's talking to me, you know?" And so it really is important to know that the work you make isn't you. All the things that are you are the things you do after you've written. You know, you are the things you like to do, your hobbies, your relationships, your problems, that's you. And that's me, for example. And I'm definitely not thinking of, equating the work I do with my sense of self, because it's a disaster. It's you're bound for disaster. One of these isn't going to go well, you know? And so you're just kind of setting yourself for a position of pain, you know? And I'm not saying, to be cold about it. I'm not saying to not love what you do, or you should. I mean, this is why, if anybody's listening to this, they're listening to this, and why you do what you do, and why we are in this endeavor. It's because we can't help but do it. But identifying the work we create with us and that personal way, it kind of, for me, if anything, is a self-defense mechanism. The fact that I know now that what I present may not be right. Do you know what I mean? No matter if I think it's right, I have to know that it may not be right. And therefore I must be prepared to rewrite the opus I thought I just wrote, 3 or 4 times, or in some cases 27 times.
Yeah.
And it's happened, and it's happened for 30-second cues. The most insignificant cues are the ones that they get hung up on. And they're like, "No, this isn't, I don't know why. It's just, and you're like, then you start presenting some of the original stuff to see if they'll go like, yes, and they still say no. And you're like, oh my God, there's no way out. But the way out is the work. You just do another one. And why is it that sound design, if the sound design isn't quite right for the director, because I've been in the room with them, and they'll say, sure, no problem. We'll look at some other options. Let's see if we can try a different kind of sound of rain on the windshield, And the director's like, I need it to be more muscular, more aggressive, just because it's going to help. and or if the set design or the car that they used, you know, is not the right car for the actor, or the actor is miscast, or the costume isn't right, like, or the wallpaper in the scene is not the right pattern. That person who chose that wallpaper is a creative, is a person who had the thinking of how that wallpaper would help tell the story that we are adding music to. So why are we the artists? You know, why are they not? They're doing the same exact work. They're serving the vision of someone and they're being paid for it. And they will change that wallpaper. Imagine the argument of, you don't understand, this wallpaper is made of a design that is intricately connected to the costume, that is the actual pendant that this actor is wearing, right? And that pendant has the design that is actually now all over the wallpaper. The directors can say, I don't care, I don't like the wallpaper. And
Yes.
there is no difference between us talking about music and them talking about our wallpaper. And to you immediately, I think once you hear that, you're like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? It just changed the wallpaper. I don't like the wallpaper. If you work with anybody, sometimes many people have worked with a web designer and then said, oh, I want a website and I want the buttons to be here and I want the menu to be there and I want this to work. And when they present you with that first design, you may not like it. You can't even explain why. You just don't like the way the navigation is working. And then you say, well, can you change the navigation? And they'll be like, well, it's my art. That's how I feel about people arguing about their score, whether the cue is correct versus the people who hired them saying they don't like it. You have to really be careful about your approach as to where you're coming from. And is it ego, to bring it back? Is it ego that is really having the conversation here? Is it your insecurity or your front, or, you know, you're fronting in a way? It's a mask of fear, you know? And I would say be way more open to, let's see if we can come up with 2 or 3 alternatives, 2 or 3 more versions of this. And maybe we start, because you will write a better cue. Seldom have I made a revision that's been worse than the original.
Okay, that you've been less happy with.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is it's better. It's a collaborative process. It's not score the picture and, you know, and send it and be gone. You know, this isn't commissioned work, you know. You're commissioned to write something that will make the director happy. And it's a collaborative conversation. You have to be open to changing what you're doing in order to kind of make it as good as it can be, you know.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing point, actually, that, you know, we're one of many departments in the movie making setup, and a bit of disassociation from the work we're doing is, I don't know, maybe it's because music is so personal to people that, you know, we take it so personally or something. But you know,
but like I saw Dune and it just got nominated, and I think rightfully so, not for many things. Unfortunately, not the director, which I thought should have been nominated. But when you see a movie like that, whether you like the movie or not, you cannot help but appreciate how well it's made. And the costume design and the cinematography and the sound design is kind of impeccable. And I'm like a huge fan of sound design. Sound to me is more important than music in a film. And, you know, if you have a good video with bad sound, it's a video, you know. If you have a bad video with great sound, it's a movie. It's weird, but it's a fact, you know. I think, you know, there are other aspects, of course, storytelling and blah, 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 and editing, but you know, you can tell when, you know, sound is really crucial. And the point I guess I'm trying to make is that all of the craftspeople are as important in helping our suspension of disbelief be engaged, you know.
I was going to ask you about that later, if there was time, about how sound design and score interact. But I may as well ask you now, because you mentioned something about Queen's Gambit, where there was a scene where near the start where she's on the drugs for the first time in the orphanage, and you'd scored that scene, I think it was, but in the end, was it that scene? They decided to go, you hadn't heard the sound design for it, you know, in her drug-induced state. And I'm just wondering, do you have to take sound design into account or would you like to be in that position to have heard it when you're scoring around it, or is there a conflict, or can music serve sometimes both purposes? You know,
Music, if music is entering the realm of sound design, it should tread carefully, you know. I do tend to think that, you know, if music's gonna do, like if someone's banging a window, bam, 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 you know, I don't know if the music should be following those physical gestures, because sound design will take care of it, you know. So it tends to be, at least when I started scoring, I would go for everything I could just accentuate physical that was visually happening. I would try to hit, you know, and to a fault, I think, and to a big fault, because it's kind of like, well, sound is already doing it, and so I always feel like it's better for sound to kind of react to, I mean, for music to react to sound. And sound is a landscape upon which you're scoring. So I'm doing my Zoom hand stuff because we now have been in front of Zoom forever. We can use our hands and establish visuals. Sorry, my dogs are playing in the background. I'm
oh
not
yeah,
sure
I hear them.
they're
That's fine.
they're going at it. So, but you have this sort of, you know, let's say a topography, you know, like you're looking at a range of mountains. That is the landscape upon which you're scoring. You're not just putting music on picture. You're kind of adding and this is the sound of the car engine, and then the dialogue happens here, and then the door closes and the car skids. All of these things are part of this, and the wind and the what they call the Bee Gees. I learned that Bee Gees term like last year, and last year they were saying something. I was doing a show, I forgot what it was, and it was like, oh, you know, the Bee Gees, and I kept thinking, are they going to play the Bee Gees music here? You know, they
Yeah.
kept, right?
I haven't heard the term Bee Gees in film.
No, and it's the background noises, the background sounds, the birds,
Ah,
you know what I mean? Like the
yeah.
ambient sound, children playing outside the room, and they kept the Bee Gees, and I'm like, and I literally had to ask, I was like, they cracked up because I was like, what, are you playing any of their songs? And I don't understand. And they're like, no, you idiot, you know. But it's, these are terms you learn as you go. But even those things are to be accounted for. And so the
Yeah.
landscape that's presented orally, um, is the landscape upon which you have to score. And so I always score with sound on. I never turn off the sound and start writing. That's very unoften. If I'm writing to picture, it's always with the sound full on, completely.
But
know.
you mightn't have the finished sound design track. You might just
No,
have to.
and sound design is a work in progress, but you imagine where things are happening, you know, as doors close, etc., and people are speaking, they're going to speak. It's going to sound better. But to speak more specifically to the Queen's Gambit, you know, I think I'm trying to think of the scene that you're talking about, but I definitely worked with previous. I worked 3 times with the same person for sound design. His name is Wiley Stateman, and we do call him Obi-Wan Kenobi. And if you look up Wiley Stateman on IMDb, you'll see why. Because, you know, he's worked on everything, and and every time he would call me and have comments or thoughts, I'd be like, okay, go ahead, you know, because he's wise, and he's been around the industry for so long. He's worked on with just about everybody, and so there is a marriage in sound and the relationship between sound and music. So we would discuss scenes as far as where music would take over or sound would take over. You know, sometimes within a game, you know, that had to be scored, you know, where there's a lot of movement, let's just say, where sound is happening when they're moving the pieces, you know, the music would kind of pull away and let the movement happen. And then the music would come in as the camera would pan off. And we would say, should music take over here? Yes, music should take over here. Usually the conversations were with the director as well. But a lot of under the hood conversations were between Wiley and myself, and what he thought the music should be doing. And I'd be like, yes, you know. And I always think that it's important, because it tends to be that music is, and I've worked on plenty of, right now I can start saying that, but that projects where I'm not even talking to the sound people, there is like no time to have those conversations. So they're just working on sound and you're working on music, and then they start mixing it. And if you go to the mix, if you're lucky enough to be invited, you're going to find that sound is usually going to win, you know, over music. Music's going to start going like here when you wanted it to be, let's say here, you know, in the level. of the mix.
Mm.
Famous movies that have like the lowest music ever, I think, is a movie X-Men. The original X-Men movie is Michael Kamen's score. You can't really hear the score. I mean, it's there, but it's like super quiet, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
Then
They
and,
favored
and
the sound effects and the sound
they
design.
will, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. They usually win. The director, and that's just sometimes the director wants to hear all the sound and not really because they don't necessarily care for music. Let's say in that case, or you never know.
Mm.
But you can only complain so much. You can only say you don't understand my art. I can't hear my art. And then
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. You kind of have to let go. There's so much you have no control over, and so many things and moving pieces and making these things that you just really are just working, and you're happy to be working,
Mm.
and grateful. And I am certainly grateful to be working. But I know where I would do if have ever been in a band, and if anybody's listening still and has been in a band, when they play the guitar or play, they always would go and like raise their amp a little bit more. You raise your amplifier just a little more. You warm
Yeah.
my
Nudge it
guitar,
up. Yeah.
want to nudge the bass up. Get the key. I got the keyboard. Hold on. Everybody's like talking. That's great. Raise the volume. All right, let's play. That is our feeling for music a lot of times, and finding that balance is just a process. And you get better as you keep doing it.
Yes. Yes. I did see you played in a band. I played in a band as well. And you
Let's play.
mentioned, yeah. I've played keys. Yeah, I'm not a guitar player, but
Great.
keys and flute. But yeah, I can always nudge up the volume on the keyboard. I always have a bit of headroom just for that.
So you can do it for yourself, right? You have
Yeah.
that little extra tour DV or something. You're like, oh, okay. All right, everybody.
Yeah.
It's weird, but it is kind of like the learning of balance and what is too loud and what is too quiet. Even within a cue when you're writing, sometimes you're like, oh, the percussion is too loud, or I gotta lower, and you're kind of just constantly futzing with things, and so you get to the sort of happy place of what you do.
So, okay, cool. So it is nice to work with the sound designer and as the, with composer sound designers together where possible. Yeah.
Ideally, it's awesome. It makes for a better show because that is the experience that there as a whole. Music is part of the sound design, dialogue, sound, and music. They all are helping you immerse yourself in the story. So the awareness of that alone kind of changes everything, as opposed to, I've worked with a music editor who always thought like sound design was like, oh, just worry about your car door closing well, very condescending. And I think it's always been, it's to a fault. It's a negative thing. I think sound design is as important as music, and they should, collaborate as much as and often as possible.
Yeah. And coming on board early then facilitates that. Like I know in Queen's Gambit you came on early, and you put together an iMovie of the screenplay and scored and did demos to that. I guess you'd call them demos. So that's such a great idea. Is that the only time you've done that, or is that something you do?
No, it's how I haven't done it much since that, but I did it with Scott because it's how I started working with Scott, because I never really scored anything before A Walk Among the Tombstones in 2012. I did one thing, and that's thanks to the person who gave me my first break. His name was Rob Legato. And we can go towards that story, but to speak to your question, when Scott started giving me the opportunity to work with him, it was going to be to write, music that would be not probably used, because I had no experience, and he was an established writer. He'd already directed a movie, and he was going to work probably with somebody else that was a named composer, and when he sent me the screenplay, I would just write the screenplay, and I started, well, what if I score the screenplay, just my version of the movie I'll get to work with, before anything's happening. And that was for something else. And I basically did the iMovie because what I have or what had the skill set in, and would bring in and just make the words happen in reading speed, just you're reading, just like you're reading a book and it's scored or something. And and then I just put music to it, and I'd send him the file, and he's like, oh, this is cool, or oh, this is horrible, or whatever, you know. And then in the Walk Among the Tombstones, that started once once he sent me the screenplay, I immediately started making these script movies, you know, and it really helped him kind of get a sense of the tone, and it was kind of influencing how he would think of the shots. The music started doing that, and not like I was like, oh, this is great, I'll have influence. I was just like, I would love to work with this person. You know what I mean? I wasn't thinking like, and so he ended up really liking that. And then for that movie, we did it. I know when we were in post with one of the music editors and a post supervisor, they saw one of the QuickTime movies with me, and they started cracking up. They're like, this is so dumb. I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know. You know, I was very like apologetic, because it's like, it's different. It's a different way of doing it, you know? And to them, it was like, why are you doing that? Why don't you just score to the moving image? But at the time, there was no moving image. It was so,
Yeah.
I remember just feeling so insecure about it, because it was just weird. And then when we moved to Godless with Scott, you know, I did it again. You know, I started doing anything that felt like a big scene in the screenplay. I would go, let me try it, because that way I can get a sense of pace and tone and what instruments will work, what don't. And by that time, you know, it was more of a process that was established. So I may have made like, you know, 8 to 10 of those for the movie and for Godless. And then for Queen's Gambit, I must have made like 4 or 5 or so. But one of them is my favorite thing, because it's not my music. The idea was based on The Robe, which is a scene, a movie that's playing at the end of episode 1. In the screenplay, it says they are watching The Robe, you know, and there's some noises in the movie as Beth sneaks out to kind of take the pills and all of that. And I started watching The Robe, and I was like, you know, to do research, because I was like, okay, what's The Robe about? That scene's the scene that's playing. Maybe I can write some music while The Robe, like in the background of a scene of The Robe, you know. And then and then I started watching, and then I got to the end, and the end sequence is very powerful in the movie, and then the music comes in. It's Elmer, no, it's Newman. It's Alfred Newman, I think it is. It's Alfred Newman. I think it's Alfred Newman who scored it. Now I forgot, but I think it's Alfred. It's a Newman. And the score kind of kicks in, and then the choir, hallelujah, hallelujah, because Richard Burton and I believe Elizabeth Taylor, they're off to their death, you know what I mean? And as they're walking, it's more of a sacrifice, martyrdom, and then it becomes hallelujah. And as they're walking, the background fades into sort of heavenly skies, you know. And and then I figured, what if the music becomes diegetic? What if the music becomes the drama that under which doing this? So I made a script movie with the words describing that she's breaking in the background you can hear the movie, the dialogue, you know, so go and something, go and, you know, punish them, whatever. And then I started changing the volume, like from the outside, you know, making it seem from far away until like really present sound when the music starts to come in. And that's as she's reaching for the pills. And I sent it to him. He's like, oh, this is cool. And then he asked Michelle Tesoro to edit that, you know, and to try doing that in the edit. So, and it worked. Like for a while, it wasn't working, because trying to get all these moving parts in the score to really fit the shots as they had been shot, as they'd been made. And the fact that it worked is, I'm so sorry, it was such a long story I just told you, and it's kind of boring in a way.
No.
But for me, it's like the thing I'm most proud of, because it was that ending sequence of episode 1 is born out of an idea for diegetic music being used of someone else's, you know, to help serve the story. And it was a collaboration, like in a true unique way, that I think really served the story. It's so cool to hear Elmer Bernstein's music as, you know, the thing is unfolding and the way it's shot. And, you know, I that's my proudest thing, and it has nothing to do with my music. It's like I was able to be part of the storytelling. You know what I mean? As opposed to what we usually are, which is just hired to write music, you know?
Yes. So. Yeah. It's so collaborative. And you're right. That's ultimately your role is to serve the story. And in any way
Yeah.
possible with music. So yeah, and that the ending to that first episode is so impactful. You know, you remember it. I don't really remember the endings to any other episodes, but I remember that one.
Yeah,
Is
yeah. My
it,
favorite is the moment where the choir goes "Ooh, ooh, ooh," whatever, and then the camera, like, and that's Stephen Meisler's cinematography, is like it's almost like a crane over her as she's climbing right through the thing, and the camera's like on top of her, following her as she kind of moves in over into the where the pills are. And I love that shot so much, and it, you know, that's the stuff you kind of look for moments like that. It's like, oh my god, this is such a beautiful shot. Oh my god, this is so cool. But yeah, so yeah, I agree. I'm a fan of what you just said too. It's true.
Awesome.